with a simple question. He feeds into it a little bit. Well, how do you read it? What do you think? And this is kind of an aside, but the way I picture this interaction, I don't know about you, but one of the things that always drove me nuts in like a school or classroom setting were the people that would raise their hand to ask a question, not for the sake of understanding, but to prove they were really smart. Do you know what I'm talking about? Some people are like, yes, I know. Some people are like, oh man, I was that person. It's okay, there's hope for you in Jesus, right? Like, that's fine. We'll forgive you. But that always drove me nuts, right? You were just trying to prove something. That's the whole reason you rose your hand there. You asked that question. And I think similarly, right, how I picture it is that when he asks this deep question and Jesus responds and goes, well, what do you think? And he's got his answer ready, right? Like, he is ready to go with this answer. He knows exactly what he's going to say. He's going to go directly to the 5th book of the Bible, this book called Deuteronomy, and he's going to go to this portion of Deuteronomy, and he's going to go to this portion that the Israelites called the Shema. And if you don't know what the Shema is, it's simply these 2 commands that are made that is the summary of the entirety of the Jewish law. Over 600 laws that the Israelites were instructed to keep can be entirely summarized in 2 commands. And he's like, this is what it means to me. It means everything, essentially. And these 2 commands are this. If you follow these 2 things, then you can keep the entirety of the law. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and your mind and your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. He says this proudly to Jesus, and Jesus just simply tells them, yeah, you're right, that's correct. And you can see it, there's something bothering him, right, with that answer. He doesn't like that. He's like, I'm just looking for a little bit more, Clearly, because in the next verse, he wants to justify himself. Chapter 10, verse 29, let's read it again. But he, after Jesus says, you've answered correctly, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, all right then, well, who is my neighbor? If you've spent any time around church or you've grown up in the church, these 2 things, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, is something that you probably have heard before. And if you're new to church, it is also still kind of the core of what we believe, right? This is how we show God's love in these 2 ways. And so, but have we ever actually taken the time to sit and think to ourselves? We are told to love our neighbor as ourselves, and actually sat and wondered, well, who is my neighbor? Like, have you sat and thought about that before? I think if we were to break down not just the original word that it was written in Greek, but also just the English word, we would come to some kind of definition of what our neighbor is. And I would say that it is this, that our neighbor is determined, or it is dictated by our nearness. Our neighbor is dictated by our nearness. There are a couple of ways I see this playing out. First is in physical nearness. It is the people who are around us. For me, and I had to defend myself because somebody tried to tell me it was Mr. Rogers. It is Sesame Street. I said that first service. It's the Sesame Street song, who are the people in your neighborhood, right? That's the first thing I think of, right? These are the people. These are my neighbors, the people that I am physically around, that I work with, that I go to school with, that I see at the grocery store. These are the people that are neighbors. It's because we are physically near to them. I think there is a mental nearness that dictates our neighbor. Are we able to foster relationships with people because we really speak the same language, both literally and metaphorically? People who share similar experiences as us, that kind of influence our perspective, who maybe have the same likes and dislikes. I think it's just factually true that you are more likely to develop a friendship or a relationship with someone if there's some kind of common mental ground that you can stand on. I think it goes deeper than that, there is an emotional nearness when it comes to who is our neighbor. Those who you have let pass, not just let sharing what you think, but how you actually feel about things. Those who you have let your guard down around. those people who have celebrated life's joys with you and grieved life's despairs, those who are emotionally near to you, those are the people who are my neighbor and who I should love. Some of them, it goes a little bit deeper. It is a spiritual nearness that describes your neighbor, the people who possess the same worldview and worship rhythm and belief system that you share. The entirety of who your neighbor is dictated by your nearness to them. We would all say, based purely on this language here, that your neighbor is dictated by your nearness to that person. And here is why this is potentially a dangerous thought, or that can become problematic. Let me tell you what happened to Israel. This was the belief. And rabbis over time took this verse and twisted it ever so slightly to say that our neighbor were the ones that we show love to are exclusively the ones who are in our community. To say, like, yes, it's about those who are near, but we only show love to those who are near. And then it got twisted ever so slightly to say, all right, well, if our neighbor is the ones who are near, that means the ones who have a different perspective on the world, who don't live in proximity to us, who we haven't let our guard down with, who don't share the same thoughts and ideas that we share, the same likes and dislikes that we have, then therefore they are not our neighbors. And that got twisted even further to say, well, if they're not our neighbors, then they have to be our enemies. If they're not our neighbors, then you must be my enemy. So if you are part of my community, you agree with me, we believe the same things, we think the same way, we hold the same worldview, we agree on most issues, then I will love you as my neighbor. But if you are not a part of my community, you look different, think different, act different, believe different, then you are my enemy. It's a good thing that is a really, really dated understanding of how the world works, right? We don't have any of those problems today. Jesus came to this world to flip our understandings and our desires upside down, and he takes this teaching of our neighbor being dictated by our nearness and is going to flip it on its head, and he does so through a story that he tells. So read this story with me. Right after this, he says, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus responds, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a priest who was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed him by on the other side. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and then set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when you come back.'" Jesus decides to tell this story, this parable of a man walking what would have been known as a dangerous road from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he faces the consequences of this decision by being met by robbers, beaten, and left for dead. And there are 3 men who are going to interact with this man. And Jesus shows the first 2 of these people should be in his community, or in the very least, this man who was beaten and left for dead should be a part of their community. And so he should receive some of this sacrificial love that we've been talking about. He should receive love because this should be a neighbor to this priest and to this Levite. But what happens in the story? They end up passing on the other side. It's significant that it's a priest and a Levite because if you were an audience member sitting listening to Jesus talk, you would think very highly of this individual. Their whole role in the nation of Israel is to be of service to the people, to meet their needs, to speak on behalf of God to the people. And so for them to see this person on the side of the road, to move to the other side and act like they don't even exist is pure condemnation at this moment. and would have been seen as really radical to really radical to what typical teaching would say. You would have thought this would be the person that would step into this person's mess and bring about healing, because that is what their job should be. But that's not what happens here in the story. For one reason or another, they move to the opposite side of the road and pretend that they don't even know him or see him. Jesus then throws our understanding upside down one more time by introducing this third person. He says that, lo and behold, a Samaritan walks along the path. Now, because it's very important for you to know what or who a Samaritan is, and it goes all the way back to this first book in the Bible called Genesis, and you can read it on your own time in chapter 27, because we don't have time to dive into the story today. But essentially, there are two brothers. They share the same father in Isaac. These two brothers named Jacob and Esau. And in this story, due to some decisions that Jacob makes and Esau makes, Esau should receive a blessing from his father Isaac. But he doesn't. Instead, Jacob steals this blessing from him. And Jacob's line is the one who continues to be decided as God's chosen people. And Jacob's descendants are the ones who become the Israelites. On the adverse, here comes Esau, and he doesn't get the blessing. Instead, he gets a curse from his father. And this curse is that he will be subservient to the people of Jacob, that his descendants will be despised by Jacob's descendants, and they will be taken over by Jacob's descendants. And those descendants, well, those are the Samaritans. This history and this narrative permeates in the culture of the people of Israel, that at the time Jesus is teaching, if you would have heard the name Samaritan, a common reference for them is that the Israelites would call Samaritans half-breeds, half-humans. They were not a part of the community of Israel, and they were seen as the enemy. In fact, if Jesus were to say that Samaritans were the ones who beat the man and were the robbers in the story, that would have been more believable than a Samaritan going out of his way to help this person. So let's pause and reflect here for a moment. Jesus in this story is an expert at getting at the heart of the issue for people. And at the beginning of the story, it is clear that this expert in the law believes that he is spiritually superior to others. His definition of his neighbor is entirely defined by his nearness, and that is a dangerous path. Because if you believe in your own spiritual superiority, then you believe that your neighbor is defined by your nearness, and that would mean that these Samaritans are not your neighbor, and the Samaritans would be your enemy. So if you have neighbors, then you have to have Samaritans. You not only have people in your community that you love and would do anything for, but you have people in your life that you would think that you are better than. And so the question is, if you fall into this camp where you think you are spiritually superior to other people, and you have neighbors, the question is, who are your Samaritans? Who are the people that you believe are not only on the outside, but undeserving to be in your community? I'm going to give everyone in the room the benefit of the doubt and say that none of us would call anyone a half-breed. Like, I'm going to give everyone the benefit of the doubt there. Don't worry, I'm not making that assumption. But maybe you would use the term unintelligent, uninformed, uneducated, intolerant, a jerk, a bigot, selfish, extremist, coward, crazy, radicalist, idiot. The words may have changed, but the intent behind them of trying to put others down and showing that you're better than them, that really hasn't changed, has it? Our culture is entirely founded upon the idea that my neighbor is the one who is near, and those who are not my neighbor are my enemy. And so who are our Samaritans? Who are the people that are on the outside of our lives because of the way that we disagree with them? Let's continue reading or let's continue the story and see what the Samaritan does. You see, the Samaritan, he sees the Jewish man on the side of the road, and he would have been the only one of these three individuals that would have been entirely justified to do what the priest and the Levite did. All of the mistreatment, all of the unkind words, all of the abuse that he has faced over time, to see a Jewish man on the side of the road, he would have been in his right to see him and to step on the other side. But something happened. There was a little bit of a difference in what the Samaritan felt compared to what the Levite and the priest felt. And it's here in chapter 10, verse 33. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. Compassion, it's this idea of a gut feeling, this feeling in the pit of your stomach that there is something not right with the current situation. The idiom that we would use here is that our heart fell into our stomach. It's this unsettled feeling at the injustice that is before you. That is the compassion that the Samaritan feels. The last piece of this is that it's not a feeling that just stays a feeling, but it's a feeling that becomes action. The only response when you feel this type of compassion is to express mercy, to not give someone what they deserve. What this Jewish person might have deserved, if you were in the perspective of a Samaritan, is to be left behind. But he decided to not give that, and then to extend grace, to give him the healing that he did not deserve in this moment. To sit there and to disinfect the wounds, to bind him up, to put him on his own donkey, to sacrifice 2 days' wages to pay for his care, to continually check up on him and ensure